So I would like to start and open up and by welcoming everybody today to this Blended Stories webinar entitled How AI Impacts Training Providers. So for me, the webinars are really important. They're organized by industry and run by industry. And very much the aim here is basically to be very much informal, however, informative, and hopefully share some effective practices as well. I say the next 45 minutes, we actively encourage spontaneity. So with Rob there, thank you so much for that. And also participation. Thanks for the thumbs up. So if you have any questions, please use the chat facility. Both myself and Jan will be monitoring that. And hopefully we can have the opportunity to bring that question to life and really bring that in. Because what we found over the years that we run these, it's about the real life examples. And we'd want this to be that type of session today as well. So I perhaps sort of jumped into it as well. So over the next 45 minutes, you're going to get to know us. We are characters. We're not the face that emails. We are actually people. For myself, I've had over 20 years in sales management, serving the professional education market space, certified accredited programs, managing services. But equally, what I've got into, obviously, we just talked about the Fire Service College there, about the human element of training, the most important part of training, but also where technology comes into part. So part of my role has been very much supporting training providers and using that, my skill sets as a capability, a new capability extension for them to engage with their own staff and also with the clients. So we see it's a through life experience through this whole sort of journey. At that point, I would like to introduce the sponsor for today and the very young looking Jan. So Jan, would you like to perhaps give a bit of an overview from your perspective to Emissio, and obviously thank you so much for sponsoring this event today.
Well, thank you, Paul. The joy of looking young you just mentioned.
Yes.
For me, that's just going to the hairdresser's ring. With regards to what we're about to do, we have two big announcements today, actually. As in Missio, we and as what we're doing here, we're scaling up. And let me tell you how that works and what that means, actually. Can you actually see this screen make more training impact? Just checking.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. Thank you for the thumbs up. So making more training impact. You see there the Emissio logo, but also the Training Journal logo. We have an agreement with Training Journal as our media partner for these blended stories, but also for our conference. And I'm coming to that in a minute. So what do we do actually as in Missio? Well, we really like quality and quantity of making impact. Now, what does that mean? Quality means that we help training companies, because that's what we do. We help training providers with the quality, design, blended online training, delivery, creating the content, also impact measurement, hot topic, and of course, content strategy more in a strategic way. On the quantity side, we help you basically get more learners. And that means scaling your training business, workshops on business modeling, launching new products or getting into new markets. Pricing strategy seems to be our most popular workshop, actually. So different things to help you. What that usually means in a project or in a process, I should say, we help companies with the planning, building, growing, and scaling their training business. You can see here how we use that as a partnership approach, but also as a process. What do we actually do for that and within that? Well, we work with learning platforms, training tools, we do content, and we do a number of services. But what really is the impact of why you're sitting here is we like an evidence-based approach. And what that means is that we sponsor research, we commission it, we collect case studies from customers. Sometimes we give that, we put that forward as awards. One of our customers won an award last year on Blended Learning, Learning Technologies Awards. They won silver. We've had 3 customers win awards already. But we also then take that data and we share it with the training provider community. And that's why you're here. Blended stories. That's what we do every month as a webinar. But the next announcement is that today, actually, we are launching the campaign for the Business of Training Conference. The Business of Training Conference is second edition. We do it on 17 October in central London. Um, you are, of course, wondering now, well, how can I learn more about that? Just look at that QR code there and point your, what shall I call it, your mobile phone at it. We will also share this later on, of course. But if you want to know more, the Business of Training Conference, 17 October, it's all about training impacts and how that will work for you, how AI plays a role in that as well. And that's where I'll stop. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Jan, for that. Before we perhaps kick into this, one of the lessons I've learned as well is also know the audience. So I think what it would be good, Jan, if you don't mind, is perhaps if you perhaps put a couple of polls together, just so we can lead into Michelle and prepare her for what is in the next 45 minutes. So if we've got any polls that we can put out there just to understand where people are, their interests, yeah, how many people they perhaps train a year or something like. Could you put a couple of polls out there for us?
I certainly can try. Let me try this launch button. I've got 3 questions for you all. The
Okay.
first question is, how many learners, how many people do you train per year? And I put some categories there. If you help us there, then just give us an idea on how many people you train per year.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see that people are fantastic. Everybody has answered this question already, so thank you very much. We're getting not everybody, sorry. We're getting good answers. I was a bit premature with my enthusiasm. We currently have 83% that has participated in this poll.
Mm-hmm.
Stall it a little bit longer. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now.
Yeah, yeah.
What I can do.
Jan, I should just make a point. Obviously, Melanie made a point in the chat as well that we know that we've actually got training. As I look at it, is a universal language, so we go across all boundaries. If you aren't a training provider, do not worry, you're still in the right place today.
What we'll do is we'll very quickly share the results of. So we like transparency. So you should be able to see this now, but I'd say most of the training providers in here today are training 250 or less people, and then scale above that, 250 to 1,000. It kind of reflects the pyramid of the industry, doesn't it? So a good proportion of all the elements or all the participants in the industry, actually. Now, I have a more realistic question, a more relevant question about AI, which is, how are you using AI? Let me watch that question. These are 2 questions.
Obviously, I will be asking Michelle, are these questions relevant? So I hope you actually did this in your design specification here, Jan.
All relevance. The question is really, well, what is the frequency that people use AI tools? And are people using it every day? See, we have really a good mix in this session, and that really shows how people are using AI or not using it yet.
Yeah, that's good.
And I'm gonna almost everybody, 88% has already answered this. This is fantastic. Thank you all very much for the participation in this. I'm going to end this poll now and answering both questions, so everything is perfect. Thank you very much. Let me end it and then share back the results with you. Which results are you seeing now? I hope all the right ones. The first question was the frequency. Most people once a week. So that's quite frequent already as well. Some people haven't tried it yet. And if you look at what are you using it for, business effectiveness wins. So more business tools than on the training itself, that side.
Okay.
By the way, the last question was multiple choice, so people could have answered multiple things within there.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Michelle, what do you think of this?
I'm really pleased to hear it's not just course creation, because that's what a lot of us have done in the training world. We've skipped over to course creation, so we can have some good stories. There's some really interesting things in the chat as well, so looking forward to hearing a little bit more about those.
Well, I give it back to you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. So I think at this point, we should actually introduce Michelle. Well, thank you very much, Michelle, obviously, for accepting the invitation as our special guest. Michelle, for people that aren't familiar, is a highly respected author, and also I noticed actually awarded the HR Most Influential Thinker of 2023. So, Michelle, thank you so much for joining today's session. And as Jan sort of alluded to, obviously with the polls, one thing is with all what we have as a target audience today, and we will bring some of those questions to life. Where do you think is the best place to start with AI?
Well, thank you for having me as a special guest. I do want to caveat this with I'm no expert in AI. I'm just a curious person using or trying to use, like the rest of us, really. This tool has been around for many years. It's just suddenly had this name, whether we're using Google or Gemini or whether we're using ChatGPT. Obviously, even yesterday they announced new stuff there. Previously it didn't have a name, and we didn't have a relationship with it because it wasn't generative in the way it is now. And so the curiosity has really peaked. And to your question, where do you start? Anywhere. Just start to build a relationship with this thing. Start somewhere and see what we can do. I found it really fascinating to come along to the conference last year. The ideas that were shared from some excellent speakers, people like Egla Weisskauter, and she's done reports since with people like Donald Taylor, who's also picking up the mantle of AI for us in this space. The response was curious, and I'm glad to see that there's been a movement from that response. So I observed last year, for anyone, just give me a shout out in the chat. Did you go to the Business of Training conference last year? Were you there? Were you listening to people like Egla? Big I know you were there, Jan. What about everyone else? It was Fab Sav. I agree entirely. It was a really well curated event. But the reason I sort of share my curiosity is I saw people in the room who were feed me, tell me, help me learn. And I guess that's why you're here today. I also saw people in the room who said, this will have nothing to do with me. I'm a face-to-face trainer. AI is not going to touch us. Now, to those people, I was surprised, because to those people, I say it will. It is affecting you. It already affects you now, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, whether you have a relationship with Gemini or you don't, it is still affecting you. So I liken this a little bit to the farriers when they invented the motor car. Oh, it's fine, we'll always have horses. Yes, we will always have horses, the same way we will always have face-to-face trainers. However, we perhaps might need not so many, or perhaps they will be augmented with other aspects of learning so that we create stronger and better blends. And this is where my curiosity lies. Like those farriers back in the day, what do we need to do differently in order to keep our businesses alive, in order to keep the job that we love going, in order for our learners, because ultimately the people learning from us are the key, in order for them to have the best learning experience. So as Melanie says, it's been around for 20 years in some form, absolutely. But now we name it, we seem to suddenly care about it more. But it's not just a new and shiny thing. So let's dig together. Like I say, I'm no expert. I'm just a curious, part of the community. And I'm just curious to hear everyone else's stories as well.
Yeah, I mean, is it probably a good point, perhaps, just to bring, I think, Peter, you had some interesting points you made in the chat. Perhaps you could bring that a little bit more to life for us, Peter Fothergill-Hingham, if I get his surname correctly. Peter, is it possible you could perhaps bring that a little bit more to life for us, to bring it to context?
Those that haven't seen Peter's comment, he talked about using AI for evaluation, for analytics, for meeting summaries, ideation, proofing, consultation, management consultation. These are technologies that are easy to find, something like Otter AI, for example. And just while Peter is available to find the mute button, give a shout out to Melanie there. Melanie's mentioned about accessibility and inclusion. I totally agree that this is one area that you cannot, in a face-to-face setting, replicate unless you, for example, get somebody to come and do sign language in the corner of the room, if that's the need. So from an accessibility perspective, being able, for example, for us today, if you need, like I do, I've got a small hearing loss, if you need closed captions, something like here on Zoom is using AI in order to provide closed captions live. And this sort of technology, we can't deny, is useful to augment us in our delivery when we are, training other people. How much of what you're doing is a face-to-face setting and how much is a blended setting at the moment? Can we have a bit of a percentage in the chat?
And also, while we're just getting some of those comments come through as well, I think one of the participants, they're asking about, information or anything like that. You made reference, sorry, Michelle, obviously to Donald as well. So I've actually put that, everyone loves data. So I've actually put that link in the chat for people. And what we'll hope to do as well, when we do the follow-up, we'll send these links out to people as well as put them on LinkedIn as well. So we've got other resources that we will share. So we want to have, as I said, want this to be informal but informative. So hopefully we can put some more valid and relevant links to people as we go through. So how's the responses going to your question there, Michelle?
There's a real mix. We've got from 100% face-to-face to 100% remote and everything in between, but there definitely seems to be a bit more on the face-to-face side, that balance, which is what you'd kind of expect, to be perfectly honest. So how do we then incorporate something like AI in our face-to-face setting? Now, the default setting tends to be generation of content. And I feel that that would be a little bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut. You're all brilliant at what you do. The knowledge is in your heads. Would we be searching the web, especially on something free like ChatGPT? It's scooping off the web, but to the point that they set that up, that free version. Obviously, they want you to, and it's not expensive if you wanted to buy the monthly amount, depending where you're located, but it isn't going to break the bank at all. So we can use it as a partner. And I do use that word specifically, a partner. It is not there yet. It cannot create infallible content. To be fair, neither can we. We're only as good as the latest research that we've undertaken, our own latest professional development. So we can certainly partner with AI. If you're working by yourself or in a small organization, and I noticed some of you in the poll earlier, 34% of you were training 250 people or less per year. So, who do you bounce your ideas off? And it's super easy to sign up to ChatGPT, for example, and just bounce ideas. What would I do if, what's the latest thinking, for example, around a certain topic? And so using it to partner with is one way in which we can start to embrace it. I wonder what other ways we could start. I love that from Simon. Treat AI like your apprentice. Absolutely. It doesn't know everything yet. So thinking about how you might want to teach something new to somebody else, you could actually bounce those ideas from AI as well. It is super important, as Melanie mentions there, the authenticity is maintained. So be very honest. Have conversations about where you found the information, and check the information. I think that's the advice at the moment. The information isn't 100% robust, but it certainly gives us that starting point. So we can, as Rita suggests, we can collaborate together. We can think about, surfacing new content. But at the moment, I wouldn't say that generative AI is there. But like I said earlier, it isn't just about Gen AI. There are other things. So what's of interest to you? Tell me in the chat, what's your area of interest? We've already had a few mentioned. I'm just trying to type and talk. I can't do that. What is your area of interest? Oops. In AI? Because we can talk about that. Now, I'm going to pick up on Melanie's. Melanie's talked about accessibility, which is huge for me. I think we need to get a lot better at that. So if we can, for example, use AI to generate captions whilst we're speaking live in a room, fantastic. Something like otter.ai is a good tool to do that sort of thing, where we can transcript and then we can provide that as a learning resource beyond. Teaching assistant in a classroom, suggests Paul. Accessibility definitely coming through. As those things are coming through, as you're sharing your interest in AI, Paul, I'm just wondering your reflections of what people are talking about in the chat there and what we're discussing.
Yeah, well, there's also, I think it encapsulates, from, if you look at it from an L&D perspective as well, the old age problem is how can we try to solve the problem of engagement as well, and where does AI fit into that old age sort of challenge that we have as L&D? How can we actually make it engaging? What can be the purpose of AI in that throes as well? And I think, when we talked about assistants, I think there's some really great cases now of where that bot can actually come in and really provide, like, because I think I saw the quote, where was it now? I think it was someone was talking about the learning is dialogue type of thing. So how can we use different tools to actually help us engage with actually our experiences? I think is quite an interesting one. I see Rita was making reference there to delivering training on a wide variety of participants, but I think the diversity is one that's obviously coming through from that perspective as well. But what other sort of engagement and relevancy do you see that's coming through by using of AI? Because as we've gone through the process, we don't sheep dip anymore, but what we can do with these type of tools, it can be so powerful if we actually set out both our design strategy and our delivery strategy in some respects. So I'd be interested in perhaps some of your thoughts around that, and how can we actually sort of omit that element of engagement now? How can we improve it? Really interesting. Yeah, because I think,
I mean, the jury's out on a lot. The jury's out on a lot of it because it's still building. I'm just going to drop a link in the chat. There's an AI for that, it's called, and it's really great because a lot of these bots have already been created by somebody. So for all of the things that you've mentioned there in the chat, so mitigating risks, engagement, dyslexia, productivity, accessibility, there's already bots out there that can support you in that. So consequently, I think that it's important that we are part of the conversation. We're part of the development of these tools, because this is not a done deal. No one's written a book on it, so to speak. We're still discovering and being curious and remaining curious, and not sort of fearful of AI, is how we can all be part of the solution. It's interesting. for me, you know, the sorts of things that are coming up, it isn't content creation, but it is, David's mentioned productivity. How can we use AI, for example, to manage our diaries? How can we use AI to send out, you know, automated messaging through things like LinkedIn to keep contacts, to get business going? These are all possible now. And the opportunity shouldn't be lost to us as trainers, training providers, learning professionals. So these are all available to us. I'm curious to hear a little bit more from our audience. You know, you started this, Paul, saying this is a community, and so I wonder if anyone wants to unmute their microphone and really just give us some case study examples. How are they using it? What have they found? What's been easy? What's not been easy? Who'd like to give us a shout out?
I can give an example from a recent
Susie,
Ofsted. We had an Ofsted visit this year, first one in 5 years. So, and since the last Ofsted, obviously AI has increased, and so our tutors, we've done CPD and standardization sessions with our tutors on how to provide improved and quality feedback to our students on their assignments that they use. So one of the challenges of that is sometimes, depending on the platform that they're using, it can be American English, so they need to watch that. But also the level of English is quite high. I've found with a lot of the AI, the level, it's a really high level written English, and obviously some students who are apprentices, there are varying levels. Some may have dyslexia. So it's really important that the tutor, we allow them to use it, but they need to contextualize it. They have to go in, they have to read it and rewrite it really to the level of that student and not just copy and paste. And so that has been a challenge for us on that side, but they've got the hang of it now. And I know that Ofsted were quite happy with how we were using that and acknowledged the work that we'd done behind that. So we were quite pleased with that from that aspect.
And Susie, you talked about Ofsted. So what was the target audience for your students? Is that in education, college?
Yes, so we're a training private training provider, and we deliver apprenticeship qualifications that range from cybersecurity, data analyst, learning and development, business admin, marketing. We have a whole host of qualifications. So our students range from 17 upwards in terms of age, and our employers a variety councils, different SMEs across England. We cover the whole of England. That's why we're 100% remote.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for that context. That's brilliant. I was just looking at Herman put a reference to the personalization of content to each learner as well. I just wondered if you could perhaps bring that to life as well, just to perhaps give some context around that. Herman, is that possible?
What, myself?
No, there was another chat in there. Well, you can answer it if you wish.
No.
But yeah, I didn't know if Herman was there just to bring that to life for us at all.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So around the personalization, so the teaching that I do is mainly at higher education. So I teach master students in MBA courses. We run through a lot of case studies, and each person generally has a very different kind of working experience, different backgrounds, and they come from different industries. So we run through different case studies, and they generally kind of want to understand how does it apply to their own situation. So we get them to run it through ChatGPT, we get them to provide their own context and backgrounds, and then to use it as that way to reason, well, how do I take the learnings from this case back to my own industry or back to my own situations? And that's what we've been trying to do. Previously, it was too hard. I've got 50-something students in front of me. How do I kind of answer each learner's questions like through the AI, and makes this much more practical to use?
Yeah. And thanks for that insight. And I'm just thinking also, I was just looking at Helen Chang in there. You had an interesting point. I wonder if the use of AI impedes creativity and creative thinking. Could you perhaps bring that to life for us as a question point? Because that's quite interesting. Helen, if you're able to do that, be really appreciated. If not, I'll pick on Rob. So, yeah, I mean, Michelle, I mean, from your perspective as well, you know, we are a creative industry. So from the perspective of AI, how do you see that imploding into the creativity element of what we do on a day-to-day perspective?
I think it's we're looking at it from the wrong end of the horse.
Yes, good. Yeah.
We need to be looking at it as another tool. It's another solution, it's another offer, it's another opportunity. So when, I don't know, if you're an oil painter and somebody created and first invented watercolors, well, what is this new watercolor? Will we be using this? You know, so it's an opportunity where we're expanding our breadth. So if you're currently, you know, creative using things like Canva, you know, this is just another tool. It augments it, it makes it quicker for you. It means that you can go and have a cup of tea every now and then. You can go and walk your dog and have those. My business is called Kairos Modern Learning, because Kairos is a moment where you can think. And so if we can use AI to automate some of the stuff, it gives us more thinking time. That's the nuance that it's not an either or. It's not a, you know, I do this or I don't do this. It's about augmenting us and our opportunity and our time. So I don't think it will stifle creativity. I actually think the opposite, because if we've got more time, we will have the opportunity to be more creative. At the moment, where we're sort of often running from thing to thing, we're busy people. You know, COVID gave us many legacies, and one of the legacies is this meeting culture that we have. If we can, for example, automate our meeting responses so that we only meet for 25 minutes instead of 30 minutes, buy us some time back, then we will be, I think, we'll be more creative. And it's about trying it out, you know. So I'm not suggesting that that Helen is wrong, and Susie's there saying she finds it creative. Get a scenario. It's when you can partner with generative AI and talk to it in a way which is useful. There are some people out there using AI as a sample, as an example, and you can get the inspiration from them. I'd encourage you to look at somebody like Ross Garner and how he's using AI to create images for his newsletter. Somebody like Ross Stevenson, who literally blew my tiny mind this week when he shared, and I know him and he doesn't speak Spanish, but he shared an entire post on LinkedIn, not just written in Spanish, but him speaking in Spanish. Now, from an accessibility perspective, as a lit reader, I was surprised to hear that he was not only speaking in Spanish, but the lip pattern was correct. Peter, I'm just going to mute you up there. We're getting some feedback from Peter. Feel free to come into the conversation. You're very welcome. But what Ross had done using AI was enable what he would deliver in person or in a virtual setting to be translated into any other language. Now, that is not only just an accessibility issue, but that's actually a reach. Imagine you, as a face-to-face deliverer, videoed and translated into any language that's possible through AI. This is meaning that you've got a global audience now, where previously you had you in whatever part of the UK or whatever part of country you're in. Suddenly you can scale. You can be you on a good day, delivering anywhere in the world. I mean, this is massive amounts of creative opportunity that's open to us. You know, so I don't see this as a negative at all. I do want to shout about Peter and his daughter. You've got a lot of love there, Peter, in the chat for your daughter who is doing her times tables. Now, this is the other thing that I think we need to open our eyes to. If we look at this with our existing eyes, with our existing lenses, it potentially is a threat, or it potentially feels difficult, or it potentially feels distant from my reality. But if we look at this from an opportunity of a new person, of a young person, of a new set of lenses, then we can see it as opportunity. We can see it as welcoming new people into the workforce to teach us that kind of thing. Young people, as Melanie says, are growing up with this, and it is their norm. Now, I want to remind you that you have also been growing up with this. We've had AI for 20 years, just haven't had a name for it. So it's not actually as scary as you think. When you go to Tesco's or Sainsbury's or any of the supermarkets and you use your club card, What's reading that? There's not a human behind there reading that. It's machines that are reading the fact that you buy leeks every Tuesday and you also buy cheese, and they put 2 and 2 together and they say, they like cheesy leeks. Let's try and sell them the products. You know, so this stuff has been around for a long time. It is just now got a name and we can use it. It can be part of our reality.
Yeah, Michelle, just picking up on your point that it's been around for a long time as well. I did some research. You know, we go in cyclic elements with inside training. And, you know, some 10 years later, we have a conversation. Weren't we talking about this 10 years ago? We haven't advanced. I see AI is different to that. Most certainly. So you remember when augmented virtual reality came onto the scene as it had a label, but people may be interested to know the very first use of a 3D devices was actually in 1838 by Charles Wheatstone. So when we talk about augmented, you know, it's been around since the 1800s. It's just finding the right application for it, and the user cases that you've been talking about. So I wholeheartedly agree that this moment in time is different because of the accessibility, but it's the user cases that we would love to learn from for everybody that's on the session today as well. So brilliant. Yeah, I mean, Peter, you're talking about your daughter. If you've got any other sort of experiences you want to bring to life for us today on the call.
I'd be delighted to do that. There's a lot of back chat happening in my office right now. We're having our staff birthday party.
Okay.
So just bear with. I think one of the applications that we're sort of seeing good use is as a mentor in the business context. So for our line managers internally to be able to talk through and to seek like a third party impartial view using some of the AI, and often that's with people who are on the move. So the ChatGPT app has a converse function, which just last night was upgraded to a really great conversant natural language processing engine. And it means that like before we sort of turn around and react, we're able to sort of test our thoughts out with a relatively like calm third party who sits outside of our business, and it's sort of like a counselor. And so that's a little bit akin to when my daughter comes home with like a problem, a school-based problem, and doesn't want to talk to me about it. The other really helpful thing, of course, is that you keep a record of all those conversations too, so you can sort of go back over them. And unbeknownst to my daughter, it transcribes all of those things. So I'm sure when the time is right, I'll explain to her that all those notes are sort of captured somewhere. But I think that the other side of that is that sometimes we're not cognizant of exactly where the origin of the information comes from. And so like everybody on this call knows, I'm sure, must treat the conversations and the guidance with like a very large grain of salt, like all outputs that we get from AI. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. And I suppose it goes point to what Michelle was also talking about. The ethical angle is super important, obviously, for consideration in this as well. And the whole verification element that we use, I see is quite a fundamental thing coming through. So yeah, Pete, excuse me. Thank you so much for that insight. Michelle, just coming back to the point you were trying to talk about the ethical element to it as well. What considerations do you think we should be thinking about in this journey as well?
Yeah, Rita's raised that about development of critical thinking and that thoughtful, considered, ethical way that we use this technology. Like any technology, we need to take this as a people-first approach. And the example there that Peter gave, I know that a lot of young people are doing very well with a help-based app that the name is fallen out of my head right now, but for a counselling app where they don't feel comfortable being able to speak to their parents or another adult, especially people that have been through COVID and been locked down and had that experience, very, very solitary experience. So it's really helping from a mental health perspective. But we do have to be minded what's happening to the data. Where is that data sitting? And we also have to be minded from an environmental angle as well. But I'll come on to that in a moment. That it is super important that we look at this from a people first perspective. it's about how it will help. It's not an either or, it's a both and. So we're not necessarily saying that we'll replace somebody's access to mental health support by an app and only an app. But if that gives them the confidence, maybe, you know, 6, 7, 8 sessions with a bot to speak to a real human, to muster up that courage, that is surely a good thing. Rather than them suffering in silence for some time. I think it all plays into each other: accessibility, mental health, ethics, discussion. It all sort of comes out of the same social need for humans to connect with other humans. And I think that this is some of the fear, that if we're all talking to bots, we're not talking to humans. The bots are only as good as the people that program them. The bots are only as good as the large language processing that it can do. And to your point, Peter, what was launched yesterday was phenomenal. You would barely realize you were talking to a bot. So where I've seen this land really well, for example, is when you have that conversation with your bank online and you get so far and then they hand you to the human. That type of technology is getting better and better. And we can do things like that from our learning. So we can have our face-to-face sessions, and then afterwards we can ask those nudge questions using technology like Elephants Don't Forget, for example, technology where they're just sending out those little nudge questions, and those question responses are judging how well people have applied the learning that you've given them. That data can then inform how you change your delivery style or your delivery content so that it's more effective for the next cohort that you have coming through. So really, this all goes back to what Jan started with. This is an evidence-based approach. We're using the data to inform us. We're using the experience of using the data to inform us as well. There is a lot of nuance in this, a lot of nuance, and we've not yet, as I say, we've not yet written the book, so we don't really know where it's landing. But before the day ends, I do want to give a shout out to the environmental factor, because the bots really suck on the environmental issues, in that they use a lot of servers. They use a lot of processing power. They all need to be provided for. You know, this becomes a question of asking your suppliers, you know, where are their servers? How are their servers being powered? Are they being powered by renewables? And we need to be much more discerning as customers of technology to ensure that we're asking those properly ethical and environmental questions, to ensure that our data is safe, that we're keeping people, particularly vulnerable people, safe, and that we're asking questions about the processing power. Of course, the more we use it, the better the technology gets, the less.
Okay. I don't know if that was just
that is a thing. So if this is mentally sound, I think, you know, at the end of the day, the AI is a tool. Let's use it for the proper service that we need to use it for, not just because we can, that we should.
I love that, Michelle. Thank you. I really like the environmental point as well, because yes, it is a big suck on the energy drain. What was it? It was back to your point on the ethics, actually. It was Donald Clark who made a comment that resonated with me. He said, when people usually talk about ethics, actually they mean their own ethics. And if people talk about AI has to be ethical and take away bias, all these topics, difficult to put in one category, but it's really the one with the loudest voice seems to have the most ethics with incorporated in AI, which is of course not a great thing. So I was curious about that. I started reading. I just put it in the chat. There's a book which is horrible if you have a virtual background. How the World Thinks. It's Julian Baggini. It's about philosophy, really, about how the Western philosophy we all know. You can use names like Plato and Aristotle that most people have some resonation with. But how are people thinking and framing their thinking in China, in India, in Africa? all the other parts of the world, pragmatism in the United States, that really influences how people also think about ethics. And that's it's a great read. I recommend.
So
It's
Jan, sorry.
So just to say, it's certainly why we, as the good actors, need to get hold of this technology so that we can influence those large language models, that we can influence the future generation. Let's not just shy away from it and leave it to people who might want to be using it for more nefarious activities. Sure, thanks for that shout out, Jean.
So AI is not controlling me, but I have noticed the clock on my bottom right hand of my computer. So I think from the perspective of the session, I think Michelle, I must say thank you so much for your contributions, your thoughts, your insight. Was great to spark conversation and perhaps some self-reflection as well. So I do appreciate your massive input to today's session. We obviously will run these another series, I'm sure, on this, because I can remember talking about AI probably this time last year. And I think your points that you've made, I think we've matured in our thinking about how best can we use this, and not to be lazy people or just, yes, it's great, we just use it and throw it at everything. I think it's about now, how can we actually, what would it stop us doing today that we can do better tomorrow? I think is a great way to leave this. For everybody on the session today, I would like to say thank you so much for your contributions, for your questions in the chat. Michelle, have you got any lasting comments just before we close this down? I'd like to pass it over to yourself.
It hasn't gone away. It isn't going away. It's here. We need to actually make friends with it, and be part of the story. If we sit and think it's for someone else, it isn't. It's happening now.
Yeah, perfect stuff. Thank you, Michelle. I'd like to thank everybody. Have a glorious remainder of the week, and I'm sure we'll be in contact very shortly with yourselves to share more great stories. So thank you and good afternoon.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. The next edition is the 11th of June, and we'll talk about how to win awards. Different topic. Bye for now.
Thank you, Jan. Bye now.